Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be doing a build video for this little micro brushless kit. Now this is the RealACC KT100 kit from Banggood, and it comes with everything you see here except for this, but we'll go over that just now. So for the motors, these are the Racer Star, or these are the BR1103, and these are the, where is it? I don't know if it's on here, but they're 8,000 kV, so you get 4 of those. And I really wish these were 1104 of a little better design. These are pretty motors, but they should work, and we'll try them out. The ESCs it comes with a Racer Star 4-in-1 6 amp ESC, and this is BLHeli-S, the V2 version that says it can do D-Shot 600. But if we look at the motor outputs, they're all out of whack, so that sucks, but we'll deal with that later. It also comes with this little board. This is a Pico BLX clone. I'm sure this is not a genuine board, but is the little 20 by 20 millimeter flight controller F3. That should work there, as well as the ESCs are. The 6 amp ESC is 20 by 20, so this will stack real small there. It also comes with a little FreeSky XM receiver. It's not the XM Plus, it's just a single antenna version, but that'll be plenty of range for that. And I'm not sure if they offer other brands, other protocols like Spectrum or Futaba receivers as well, but that came in this kit. And also comes with probably like 4 sets of these little props that should work okay. We'll give them a shot. And now also the frame here, this is the RealACC KT100 that they've named the whole kit after. I just put a little bit of it together. It's just a little 100 millimeter, I think it's 2.5 millimeter carbon frame. A little bit heavy, probably too much for this, but again, we'll see how it goes. And the camera, this does not come with this. This is the Eachine VTX 03. I believe it's called. It's a little all-in-one camera and video transmitter that came separate. It does not come in this kit. But this kit overall is definitely not for someone who's looking for extreme performance. It's definitely maybe for someone maybe looking for a first build, or if they really are tight on a budget, this will do pretty well, hopefully, for that. So let's get right into this. Alright, so first off, let's start with mounting the motors to the frame. Now, as far as I can tell, the frame does not have a front or back besides these little tabs here, which I'm pretty sure hold a rubber band to go around and go over the LiPo. So pretty much just, you know, side to side. So I guess front and back here, we'll just go with that. But it's not really going to matter when putting our motors on here. Now the motors all each come with their own little bag of 4 screws, and they're actually Phillips head, which is pretty interesting. They're not hex drive, but just get some blue Loctite and just put a little on the end of the screw. There we go. And then these aren't there's no thread on these motors. The props are just push-on, so it doesn't matter where we put them. Just basically screw it in. And the holes should line up very well. And these motors are nice. There's no bottom on them, so you can very easily see if the screw is going to touch the windings, but it's got a long ways to go on this frame, so don't worry about that at all. So get these all screwed in. Don't tighten them all up until you get them all in. There's 2, and that's the last one all in. And now these are just holes, they're not slots, so it should fit up exactly perfectly in the middle. You can see the C-clip down there just lined up right in the middle, but just make sure everything looks all good. It spins freely. Once again, no screws touching, and then tighten them down. And just don't go crazy on these. They're super tiny motors, and you know, you got Loctite on there. You don't want to strip anything, so that looks good. The first motor is installed, and the wires will be plenty long enough to go into the 4-in-1 ESC here. So let's do the other 3. Alright, there we are with all 4 motors mounted. So that looks good. So next we're going to go into mounting the 4-in-1 ESC, and I just cut off the heat shrink and the sticker because that was actually in the way of the holes. But the hardware they include with this frame, all the standoffs and stuff, it's a little bit interesting, so I kind of had to mess around to see what would work. But I came up with taking one of these M2 screws, these nylon screws that go through the bottom, just basically put it up through the bottom, and then take one of these little couple millimeter nuts there, and they're actually M3s, so they don't thread onto it, but they'll work just fine as a spacer when we tighten it down. Then put the board on, and then put one of these little spacers as well, the M2, that'll screw into it, and then and that gives us enough clearance off the frame, keeping it low enough. And then we'll be able to put the board, the flight controller here, and then another one of these screws down into it to tighten it up. But we will have to cut this screw because it is too long. But that's just how I did that. So I'm going to put the other standoffs to mount this ESC firmly. Alright, so not really in any particular order, but I'm going to cut these wires here. And I do want to leave them a little bit longer than I need to, but I don't want to just leave them this long because that'll look super sloppy. So let's see, I'll just bend them, just cut a little bit off the end of these. Alright, those are all stripped finally. That was hard since they are plastic, not nice silicone, so I'm get my iron ready here. I've got a smaller tip on than usual, but still a larger chisel tip one, and I've got it set to a decently high temperature, not as high as normal, because these are such small pads. Don't want to fry anything, but be careful of this little post here when tinning. Actually, I'll zoom out for this. There we go. Just do the 3 right here. You can do them all if you want, actually. Just apply some heat to the pad, and then put some solder on and make sure it all flows, and you should get a nice shiny joint just like that. I'm going to do all of them. Tinning up quite nicely there. I'm gonna make sure you get the pad nice and warm to accept the solder before you try and put it on, or else it won't stick. There we go. Alright, now the pads are all tinned and nice there. We can tin these wires, and since it's plastic insulation, they're probably gonna shrink back quite a lot there. So you should probably actually cut these longer than you need. Yeah, it's shrunk back a lot. So I'm actually gonna trim the ends of these a little bit shorter because I don't want all that extra wire sticking out. Okay, now let's put them on. I'm just going to wire them straight up. I'm not going to worry about crossing them or anything because I'll do that in BLA configurator with the ESCs themselves. I'll make sure the wire sits all the way down flush against the pad and solder flows all the way through. There we go. Now we can just sort of tidy these up. Tuck them off to the side a little bit, and that shouldn't need anything to hold it down there, and it doesn't look too terrible, but you could put a little thing of tape around it if you want. But I'm going to go ahead and finish up the other 3 in the same exact fashion. Alright, there's all the ESCs all soldered up. You can see it looks pretty neat there. And then so next we're going to work on adding the flight controller. It's actually wrong, these are not the signal pads along the edge here. There's actually a signal, this is meant to power the ESCs, act as a PDB as well, but we're not going to be using that function. But the signals are actually for the ESCs on the corners next to the main power pads. But if you look at this, that's actually looking like a pretty cool low profile, low stack quad. And if you don't want to add the FPV, once you hook the flight controller up, you could just stop here, which actually might build another one if it flies well enough to have a small acro line of sight quad. But for this cable here, this is just going to plug in, and now the ESC is kind of all screwed up, but if let's just say this is forwards, we can just point the arrow on the board forwards. This is going to be motor 1, 2, 3, 4 for the beta flight configuration. So motor 1, we can look over here, is coming in to, you can't see it, but it says pad C2, so this is going to be 2 over here. So motor 1, so we're gonna take this is the power for the ESC. This actually, what is this? Okay, so this is power, ground, and 1. So we're gonna need to take 2, which will be this yellow wire here, and this needs to come up to 1 on the board. It's gonna be confusing, but if you just think about it and work it out, it'll make more sense. So I'm actually going to solder underneath. I'm going to bring it across, and this is just going to come up to 1 here. I'm going to leave a little bit of extra room, but basically I'm just going to cut it about there because I'm going to route stuff under the board if I can to keep it a little bit cleaner, so that'll be good. Alright, the board is now all wired up with these signals as I explained earlier, and then I just took the red and black for the power for the flight controller here and wire them up underneath to these large pads that say BAT. Alright, and make sure your positive goes towards the circle pad, which is on the right, and the negative goes towards the square pad. And then this can just kind of tuck and fold over, and then everything looks pretty neat and clean there. It doesn't look too bad. And now for screwing these down, they actually don't include any more of these screws that I mentioned earlier to do that. So my way around it is to take these standoffs they give you, because they give you a couple different options to mount, and take that and basically cut a little bit off the end so they're shorter, because once again the screw in will be too long, and then use some cutters to cut off, basically just cut the top part in half, so we end up with something looking like this. Doesn't look the best, but that lets us give something to grip to, and it just screws right down and will tighten down the flight controller just like that. Okay, so now that everything is all settled in with the flight controller there, we're going to start to connect up our little receiver, the FreeSky XM here, and now this just uses the S-Bus, 5 volt, and ground, just 3 little wires that we're going to have to add to that. And on here, there's 3 ports, 3 S-Bus, 5 volt, and ground right across the front here, but we actually do have to, there's a little, see those little 3 pads right here, right there? We need to solder the middle and the left pad together to select S-Bus. If you solder the middle and the right pad together, it'll select PPM, but we want S-Bus, so we need to do the middle and the left one if you're looking at it from the bottom here. And that's obviously way too small for me to show the soldering on camera, but just get a little bit of solder just between them. You don't need a whole ton, just so as long as they're bridged together. Doesn't have to look pretty. There we go, and make sure you didn't short anything else in the process. Okay, so we can continue on with the camera and the receiver here, but first we're going to put the receiver on. And now normally I never use pins, but the pins that actually come included with, there's a bent one here, and then there's straight ones, and I actually trimmed them so both sides are equal, so they're real short, because the S-Bus here is just on these 3 pins. Let me put this in. These 3 pins on the end here, and if we put that in and the pins in, they go right down, and then that actually can connect straight up to the receiver, and that's going to keep it actually really low. That's the perfect height, and it can almost just barely rest against this chip here, and then it'll be a perfect little installation. Super easy. You don't have to worry about any wires. So I'm actually going to use pins here. So just going to put the pins in and then solder them up. Probably easier to take the board off and do it from the underside, but I'm going to try and heat it through. Look at that. Just the pins, just I never thought I'd like pins with that, and that holds it real well there. You probably could put or should put some stress relief on it, but something like this on this light of a quad, I'm not going to worry about it. It's only a $10 receiver anyways. Seriously doubt it's going to get broken. So that should be all good with the S-Bus once again on the middle port, the square. The receiver has a manual with it, as well as on the site there's a diagram of the flight controller if you ever forget any of the pads and what they are. So next we're going to start building up. That's pretty much the stack done. Now we just have to basically just building the mount for the camera to sit up here. Everything else should be done besides cutting these to length, these wires, and then adding our battery connector there. But basically you're just going to take these M3 steel bolts, M3x6 I think they are, and these standoffs, and there's extra holes right here, just outside of the flight controller ones, to put these up through. Alright, so as it turns out, the edges of the 4-in-1 ESC actually extend too far over this hole. I could not get the little standoffs through, so what I had to do is take this little Dremel tool with sort of a ceramic end, and I had to file down, you could use a knife also, to sand down the edges of the ESC so these standoffs can go through. And hopefully there was no traces through there. You can see some copper on the edge, but hopefully there was no traces that I cut through. But now those should just fit through there, but I'm actually going to get the camera fitted first, and it's just going to sit, you know, somewhere in here. I'm not going to worry about the length, really. So I'm just going to cut this connector off, and these two wires are going to go to little pads that say VTX and ground, and these two little circle pads right here, and then I'll provide the voltage for the camera, and that is LC filtered. This pad's tinned. There we go. And this will just give us enough room for the camera to sit somewhere in the top plate up here. So let's sort of build through the frame, just kind of figure it out and put some standoffs together. Alright, so here we are back. I'm kind of sorry I had to skip a little bit, but this top portion was pretty interesting to figure out and actually get together. But basically we just put this top plate over the parts that we had there. It just screws on with 4 screws. And then I routed the video transmitter and camera wires that I had up there underneath that. And there's these two side plates, and they connect with these purple standoffs here. And there's actually a little circular part that goes around this camera that holds it in place, but it's really loose, so I'll have to glue that in. But I just put it in these holes, these slots that it goes there. And then I have one more screw here. Oops, wrong Allen key. One more screw to put in, and this should pretty much finish everything up. You still have to glue this camera in, and it does get it pretty high. There's a lot of space wasted, but I don't think it should be too much of a problem. And then we can just kind of ball this antenna up and route it out the side somewhere with a zip tie, and then we can trim these power wires and put a connector on for a battery, say something like a 2S600 or something like this. And then we'll pretty much be done. So we'll glue that, and then we'll keep going. Okay, the camera is all glued in up by the lens here. You can see I just put that in there, as well as I routed that little antenna up with just a zip tie and heat shrunk it out the top on the edge here. Not the best, it can still swivel, but it should work pretty well and be very durable. So pretty much lastly, we're just going to have to add our battery connector coming off the back of this. Now this is the battery I'll be trying. It's a 2S600, and it had a little micro LOSI connector on it, and these are the only connectors I could find. I have no idea what they're called. They're just some random weird connectors, but if I put this on here, I wouldn't be able to charge the battery because I only have one female of these, so I basically just split the connector. So I'll be using this one for flying and this one for charging. I just left the JST on there. So for this, basically we're just going to cut it. These wires pretty short. Yeah, let's go about there. Now it's just a matter of stripping and tinning them. Okay. And there we go. We are all done with this little RealACC KT100 kit. Now it probably is not built quite the right way, with a little bit of interesting battery connector and battery and just everything overall. And I'm not expecting this to be super powerful, especially, you know, with all this extra added weight and this big battery. But let's just get a weight on it real quick, like this. I'm going to say 67 grams. 55, okay. And then with the battery is 32. Wow, that's a heavy battery for this. So 87 grams. So, you know, probably too heavy to get good performance, but it should still put around about 20-degree angle on the camera. And now is a good time to make sure you do a continuity check with a multimeter so nothing shorts before you plug it in. But yeah, that's going to be the end of the video here, and there'll be a link down below to this listing on Banggood if you're interested in it. Once again, the only extra thing you have to pick up for this kit is the camera and VTX, which I got the Eachine VTX 03 combo. So that was the end of the video. Please subscribe if you weren't already, and there will be a link down below to my Patreon if you wish to help support the channel if you enjoy this video and found it helpful. And I'll see you in the next video.